An FBI rookie stares across a moonlit beach as a gang of masked bank robbers disappears into crashing waves. Minutes later, he's jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, chasing a suspect through the sky at nearly 5,000 feet. It's one of the most outrageous action films ever made, yet almost everything about it feels strangely real. Released in 1991, Point Break was directed by Kathryn Bigelow and starred Keanu Reeves, Patrick Swayze, Gary Busey, and Lori Petty. On the surface, it's a story about an undercover agent infiltrating California's surfing culture to catch a gang known as the Ex-Presidents. Beneath the action, however, lies a film about obsession, freedom, and two men who gradually become reflections of one another. Packed with practical stunts, real surfing, genuine skydiving, and one of cinema's greatest foot chases, Point Break nearly drowned its cast, terrified its insurance company, and pushed Hollywood stunt work to astonishing new levels. 3 decades later, it remains one of the most influential action films ever made. 20 facts, counting down. Fact 20. Patrick Swayze insisted on performing astonishingly dangerous surfing himself. Patrick Swayze already had a reputation for throwing himself into physically demanding roles, but Point Break tested him like never before. Before filming began, Swayze trained extensively with professional surfers so he could ride real waves instead of relying entirely on stunt doubles. Kathryn Bigelow wanted audiences to believe Bodhi genuinely lived for the ocean, and Swayze agreed that authenticity mattered more than convenience. During several beach sequences, Bodhi paddles into powerful Pacific swells before carving across breaking waves with remarkable confidence. Although specialist surfers handled the largest and most dangerous surf, Swayze completed far more of the water work than studios normally allowed leading actors to attempt. Production crews battled cold water, shifting tides, and unpredictable weather throughout filming. Swayze later admitted that surfing proved even more physically exhausting than many of the film's famous fight scenes. His commitment helped turn Bodhi into one of action cinema's most convincing adrenaline addicts, because audiences could often see the actor, not a double, riding the waves himself. Fact 19. The legendary skydiving chase pushed Hollywood stunt work beyond its limits. The sequence where Johnny Utah leaps from an airplane without a parachute remains one of the most astonishing practical stunts ever filmed. Kathryn Bigelow refused to fake the skydiving with obvious visual tricks if she could avoid it. Instead, world-class skydivers performed dozens of real freefalls from thousands of feet above the California desert. Special helmet-mounted cameras captured performers tumbling through open skies at speeds approaching 120 miles per hour. The most unforgettable moment comes when Johnny dives after Bodhi, catches him in mid-air, and straps them together before pulling a single parachute just seconds before impact. While close-up shots used the actors suspended beneath cranes and wire rigs, the vast majority of the freefall footage was completely genuine. Skydiving coordinator B.J. Worth later explained that filming dialogue while falling through the sky required months of planning and repeated jumps. At the time, very few action movies attempted anything so ambitious. The result still looks remarkably convincing because audiences are watching real people hurtling toward the earth rather than computer-generated effects. Fact 18. Keanu Reeves endured months of brutal FBI and surfing training. When Keanu Reeves accepted the role of rookie FBI agent Johnny Utah, he knew learning lines would be the easy part. Kathryn Bigelow wanted him to move like both a former college quarterback and a federal agent, while gradually transforming into a believable surfer. Reeves trained with former FBI advisors to understand investigative procedures before spending countless hours in the Pacific Ocean learning to balance on a surfboard. One early sequence shows Utah repeatedly wiping out in crashing waves before finally standing for a few brief moments. Those clumsy falls were not carefully choreographed acting. Reeves genuinely struggled during the early weeks of training, suffering bruises and exhaustion while trying to master the sport. As filming continued, his confidence noticeably improved, mirroring Johnny's growing acceptance into Bodhi's surfing circle. Bigelow deliberately preserved that progression, allowing the audience to watch both the character and the actor become increasingly comfortable in the water. The physical transformation helps sell the undercover story from beginning to end. Fact 17. The famous foot chase was filmed with breathtaking practical realism. Few action sequences have been copied as often as Johnny Utah's relentless pursuit of Bodhi through suburban streets. After an FBI raid goes disastrously wrong, Bodhi sprints through backyards, leaps over fences, crashes through gardens, and disappears into narrow alleyways while Utah struggles desperately to keep pace. Kathryn Bigelow wanted the chase to feel exhausting rather than superhuman. Handheld cameras race alongside the actors, creating the sensation that viewers are running only a few steps behind them. Reeves and Patrick Swayze completed much of the sprinting themselves, forcing both actors into weeks of demanding conditioning beforehand. One unforgettable moment shows Bodhi vaulting over a fence while Utah crashes directly through it instead, splintering wooden boards before stumbling back into pursuit. The sequence constantly changes direction, forcing audiences to experience the same confusion and desperation as Johnny himself. It remains one of the greatest foot chases in action history precisely because it never pauses to become stylish. It simply keeps running. Fact 16. The iconic ex-president's masks became instant pieces of movie history. Every bank robbery in Point Break begins with one unforgettable image. 4 armed robbers storm through the doors wearing rubber masks of former United States Presidents Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, and Lyndon B. Johnson. The disguise perfectly reflects the gang's rebellious sense of humor while instantly making them visually unforgettable. During the opening robbery, the masked criminals leap over counters, empty cash drawers in under 90 seconds, and disappear before police can react. The exaggerated presidential faces create an unsettling contrast with the frightening efficiency of the crimes. Production designers tested numerous mask designs before settling on exaggerated likenesses that audiences could recognize instantly, even during fast-moving action scenes. The idea became so iconic that the ex-presidents entered popular culture almost immediately, inspiring references in countless films, television shows, comics, and video games. More than 30 years later, those rubber presidential masks remain one of the most recognizable costumes ever created for an action movie. Fact 15. Patrick Swayze cracked ribs refusing to fake one brutal fight scene. Patrick Swayze's commitment to realism nearly put him out of action. During the film's climactic beach confrontation, where Johnny Utah finally catches Bodhi before the legendary 50-year storm, Swayze insisted on performing the physical struggle himself rather than handing it over to a stunt performer. Throughout production, he repeatedly threw himself into tackles, falls, and fight choreography with little concern for his own safety. During one particularly violent rehearsal, he reportedly cracked several ribs, but chose to continue filming after receiving medical treatment because shutting down production would have delayed the already demanding schedule. The punishment shows on screen. Bodhi staggers across the sand, soaked by crashing waves, battered, exhausted, yet still defiant. Kathryn Bigelow wanted every punch to feel painful instead of glamorous, and Swayze delivered exactly that. His willingness to absorb real punishment gave the final confrontation a level of physical authenticity that many action films still struggle to match. Fact 14. The bank robberies were timed with military precision for one shocking reason. The ex-presidents robbed banks in less than 90 seconds, and that number wasn't chosen at random. Kathryn Bigelow consulted former law enforcement advisors who explained that professional robbery crews often planned operations around police response times. The gang's entire strategy depends on entering, emptying the cash drawers, avoiding the vault, and escaping before officers can establish a perimeter. During one robbery, Bodhi calmly watches a stopwatch while his crew sweeps through the lobby. The robbers ignore jewelry, personal belongings, and anything that slows them down. They're disciplined professionals, not reckless criminals. That precision makes them far more frightening than heavily armed gangsters spraying bullets in every direction. Even the getaway is carefully choreographed, with the surfers sprinting through side streets before disappearing toward the coast. The realism behind these robberies helped distinguish Point Break from many action films of its era, grounding its wild premise in believable criminal tactics. Fact 13. Gary Busey nearly steals the entire movie as Angelo Pappas. Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze receive most of the attention, but Gary Busey's veteran FBI agent Angelo Pappas quietly provides the film's emotional backbone. Pappas is the investigator who first notices an unlikely connection between a string of bank robberies and Southern California's surfing community, a theory his colleagues dismiss as ridiculous. One memorable scene shows him enthusiastically spreading photographs of surfers across his desk, while convincing Utah that the ex-presidents are riding waves between robberies. Busey delivers every line with infectious conviction, balancing humor with genuine detective work. His chemistry with Reeves gives the investigation warmth before the story grows increasingly serious. Rather than portraying a cynical veteran, Busey creates a man whose excitement for solving the case never fades. The partnership between Pappas and Utah became one of the most beloved mentor relationships in action cinema, adding heart to a film already overflowing with adrenaline. Fact 12. Kathryn Bigelow became the first woman to redefine modern action filmmaking. By 1991, large-scale action films were overwhelmingly directed by men. Kathryn Bigelow ignored expectations and approached Point Break with remarkable confidence, refusing to soften either the action or the emotional complexity. Instead of treating surfing and skydiving as simple spectacle, she used them to explore Bodhi's philosophy of living without fear. One striking sequence shows Bodhi riding enormous waves at sunrise before calmly explaining that true freedom comes from confronting death rather than avoiding it. Bigelow balances breathtaking action with surprisingly intimate character moments, allowing the growing bond between Utah and Bodhi to become just as important as the FBI investigation. Her energetic camera work, commitment to practical stunts, and willingness to embrace ambiguity helped reshape the action genre. Years later, she became the first woman to win the Academy Award for Best Director with The Hurt Locker, but many filmmakers still point to Point Break as the film that announced her extraordinary talent. Fact 11. The surfing culture was portrayed with unusual authenticity for Hollywood. Rather than presenting surfers as carefree stereotypes, Point Break immersed audiences in a genuine community. Professional surfers served as advisors throughout production, helping actors understand the etiquette, language, and mentality of the sport. Real beaches around Los Angeles and Ventura became living backdrops filled with experienced surfers instead of obvious extras. One peaceful sequence shows Bodhi and his friends sitting around a beach bonfire discussing waves, weather, and the endless search for the perfect break. Those conversations feel natural because they were heavily influenced by real surfing culture. Even the language, terms like point break, set, and ride the line, reflects authentic surfing vocabulary. Kathryn Bigelow wanted viewers to understand why Johnny gradually falls in love with this world, making his conflict between duty and freedom far more believable. The surfing isn't just scenery, it's the philosophy driving every major decision in the story. Fact 10. The ending divided audiences because Johnny Utah breaks every FBI rule. Most action films conclude with the hero arresting the villain and restoring order. Point Break chooses something far more complicated. After tracking Bodhi across the world to Bells Beach in Victoria, Australia, Johnny finally catches him just as the legendary 50-year storm arrives. Giant waves explode against the cliffs while Bodhi stares toward the ocean with unmistakable excitement. Instead of handcuffing him immediately, Johnny listens as Bodhi asks for one final ride. Against every instinct drilled into him at the FBI Academy, Utah removes the handcuffs and lets him paddle into the monstrous surf. Moments later, Bodhi disappears into the enormous waves, never returning. The decision shocked many viewers, but Kathryn Bigelow insisted it completed Johnny's transformation. By the end of the film, he no longer sees the world as simple heroes and criminals. He understands Bodhi's flaws, yet also understands the freedom he spent his life chasing. It remains one of the boldest endings in action cinema. Fact 9. The famous airplane sequence terrified the film's insurance company. Filming real skydiving sequences with actors attached to complex rigs was considered extraordinarily risky in 1991. Insurance representatives reportedly expressed serious concerns about the production's ambitious plans, particularly because Patrick Swayze was determined to perform portions of the airborne work himself. Special camera systems had to be engineered to withstand intense wind pressure while remaining stable enough to capture usable footage. Experienced skydivers repeated jumps dozens of times until every angle matched Kathryn Bigelow's vision. During the breathtaking chase, Johnny and Bodhi tumble through open sky while exchanging shouted dialogue as the ground rushes closer beneath them. Although some close-ups were completed using suspended rigs, the surrounding footage came from genuine freefalls performed by highly trained professionals. The combination of practical photography and innovative camera work produced one of the most convincing aerial action scenes ever filmed. Decades later, it still feels astonishingly real because so much of it actually was. Fact 8. Bodhi became one of cinema's most unforgettable anti-heroes. Patrick Swayze could easily have played Bodhi as a conventional bank robber. Instead, he created a charismatic philosopher obsessed with living completely in the present. Bodhi quotes presidents, speaks about fear as though it were a disease, and treats surfing, skydiving, and robbery as different expressions of the same desire for absolute freedom. One memorable beach scene shows him standing barefoot beneath the setting sun, calmly explaining that people spend their lives trapped by routines while he refuses to waste a single moment. Swayze delivers the speech with such conviction that audiences almost forget they are listening to a dangerous criminal. That moral ambiguity became one of the film's greatest strengths. Bodhi is intelligent, generous to his friends, and deeply loyal, yet entirely willing to endanger innocent lives to preserve his lifestyle. Few action villains have inspired as much admiration and discomfort at the same time. Fact 7. The relentless action was achieved with remarkably little visual trickery. Long before digital effects dominated Hollywood, Point Break relied on practical filmmaking. Surfing sequences combined real athletes with carefully positioned cameras mounted in the water, Foot chases unfolded through actual neighborhoods rather than controlled studio backlots. Fight scenes emphasized physical impact instead of exaggerated wirework. Even the climactic storm at Bells Beach mixed real ocean conditions with carefully staged photography rather than computer-generated waves. One spectacular sequence shows Bodhi sprinting across a suburban lawn before vaulting over fences, while Johnny crashes through obstacles in desperate pursuit. Almost every impact audiences see occurred physically during filming. Kathryn Bigelow believed genuine movement always looked more convincing than artificial spectacle. That philosophy gave the film an immediacy many modern action movies still struggle to replicate. Every punch, jump, wipeout and fall carries visible weight because performers genuinely experience the physical demands of the scenes. Fact 6. Point Break disappointed at first before becoming an enduring classic. When Point Break opened in July 1991, reviews were mixed and some critics dismissed it as another summer action movie. Although the film earned a respectable box office return, few predicted it would become one of the defining action films of its generation. Home video changed everything. As audiences discovered the movie on VHS and cable television, its reputation grew steadily year after year. Viewers appreciated Kathryn Bigelow's stylish direction, Patrick Swayze's magnetic performance, and Keanu Reeves's believable transformation from idealistic agent to conflicted outsider. Dialogue that initially seemed outrageous became endlessly quotable, while the surfing and skydiving sequences remained breathtaking long after newer effects-heavy productions had aged. What began as a solid commercial success gradually evolved into a genuine cult phenomenon. Today, Point Break is regularly ranked among the greatest action films ever made, proving that some movies grow stronger with every passing decade. Fact 5. The movie inspired countless action films that followed. The influence of Point Break reaches far beyond surfing. Its central idea, a law enforcement officer infiltrating an extreme subculture before sympathizing with the criminals, became one of Hollywood's favorite storytelling formulas. The most famous example arrived a decade later with The Fast and the Furious, which replaced surfboards with street racing but retained remarkably similar themes of loyalty, friendship, and blurred moral lines. Numerous action directors have also cited Kathryn Bigelow's commitment to practical stunt work as a major influence on their own careers. The relentless foot chase, realistic fights, and authentic sports photography established a new benchmark for kinetic filmmaking. Even audiences unfamiliar with Point Break have almost certainly watched films shaped by its DNA. Its legacy extends far beyond its original release, quietly redefining what modern action movies could become. Fact 4. Bells Beach was the perfect ending despite one surprising filmmaking secret. The film concludes at the legendary surfing destination of Bells Beach in Victoria, Australia, where Bodhi waits years for the mythical 50-year storm. The location has become inseparable from the movie, yet many of the surfing scenes were actually filmed elsewhere because production schedules and weather conditions made capturing the required waves extremely difficult. Careful editing blended footage from multiple locations into one seamless finale. As towering waves crash beneath dark skies, Bodhi paddles toward the horizon while Johnny watches silently from the shore. The illusion works so perfectly that generations of viewers have assumed every frame was captured at Bells Beach itself. It's a reminder that movie magic often comes from clever editing as much as spectacular locations. Fact 3. Johnny Utah's transformation became the film's real story. At first, Johnny sees the surfers as suspects. By the end, he envies the freedom they represent. Keanu Reeves carefully builds this evolution across the film. Early scenes show Utah wearing formal FBI suits, speaking cautiously and trusting rules above instinct. As he spends more time with Bodhi's group, his appearance relaxes, his confidence grows, and his priorities begin shifting. One striking moment shows him standing barefoot on the beach after sunrise, quietly realizing he no longer fits comfortably inside either world. He has become too close to arrest his friends, yet too honorable to join them. That emotional conflict gives Point Break surprising depth beneath its spectacular action. It is ultimately the story of a man discovering that the life he dreamed of may not be the life he truly wants. Fact 2. The impossible friendship between Utah and Bodhi defines the entire film. Most action heroes simply defeat their enemies. Johnny Utah and Bodhi become something far more complicated. They challenge one another, rescue one another, betray one another, and ultimately understand each other better than anyone else. Their relationship evolves through surfing sessions, skydives, philosophical conversations, violent confrontations, and shared moments of absolute trust. By the time Johnny lets Bodhi ride the final wave, viewers understand that the decision isn't about justice. It's about acknowledging the extraordinary bond that developed between two men who chose completely different paths through life. Few action films have explored friendship with such unexpected emotional complexity. Fact 1. Point Break proved action movies could be thrilling, intelligent, and unforgettable. The cold open began with masked bank robbers vanishing into the Pacific Ocean. By the final wave, Point Break has become far more than a chase movie. Kathryn Bigelow combined breathtaking practical stunts, unforgettable performances, and genuine emotional depth into an action film unlike anything audiences had seen before. Patrick Swayze created one of cinema's greatest anti-heroes. Keanu Reeves delivered the breakthrough performance that launched him toward action stardom. Together, they transformed a story about surfing criminals into a timeless exploration of freedom, obsession, and loyalty. More than 30 years after its release in 1991, Point Break continues inspiring filmmakers because it understood one simple truth. The greatest action scenes only matter when the characters give you a reason to care who survives them. And that's 20 facts about Point Break, 1991. A movie about surfers robbing banks became one of the greatest action films ever made, proving that sometimes the biggest risks create the most unforgettable legends. If you enjoyed this countdown, subscribe for a brand new documentary every week and tell us which classic film we should explore next. Thanks for watching.